I didn't really realize he had so many when he told me that I could come down and get them. I think I'm going to take some and share them with Granny. Okay. So as you can see, today we're at Pop Pop's berry farm. It's not really a berry farm. It's my brother's, his passion to grow fruit, and so that's where we're at. He's given me some grapes today that we've been picking. You've already seen that, but I'm going to show you some different grapes that grow wild. So these are grapes that are wild in Appalachia, and they grow along the creek. You can hear the creek in the background. And what we call them are fox grapes. People in other places may call them something different, but fox grapes is what we call them. They don't get ripe till later in the summer. I see one or two just beginning to turn. If you can see way up there, you can see some. So they're a great grape to make jelly out of, to make juice out of. Pap had wonderful stories of when he was a boy. He would go every year with his grandma. We called her Big Grandma. He would go with her, and he would climb up they'd go along the creek, and she would get the ones that she could, and he would reach the ones that she couldn't reach. He would climb up higher in the trees so that he could get them. That's why he would go with her. He had a really, it's kind of bittersweet story about he had a pocket watch. One of his uncles had bought him, and he was so proud of that pocket watch. And while he was up in the trees getting the grapes for the fox grapes for Big Grandma, that watch fell out of his pocket and landed on a creek rock and just broke. And he was so sad about it. And he said they did try to get him another one, but they could never quite find one, or they couldn't come up with the money that it took to buy another one, so he never did get a pocket watch. But he had great memories of helping his Big Grandma get those fox grapes, and his mother, and then even better memories of them using the grapes to make jelly, to make juice out of, different things. The only thing he didn't like that they made, he said they would take grapes, wild grapes, fox grapes, and they would pack them in crocks with grape leaves in there, and they pickled them. They fermented them, and they were pickled grapes, he said they called them. And they made them every year, and he said he hated them. He didn't like it at all. And it's funny, he said, when he was telling me that, he said, so I was sure glad when better times come along and we didn't have to eat no more pickled grapes. Because you think about if times were hard, well, you'd be grateful for those pickled grapes, whether you liked them or not. They would be food, you know, food for sustenance. But he was glad when things got better and he didn't have to worry about eating no pickled grapes. So the first thing you do is kind of like we say, look the beans. Well, we're going to look the grapes. We're just going to go through and pull them off the stem, and any bad ones, that one's okay. It just got squished with me and Corie bringing them up. But any like really buggy looking ones or shriveled ones you can get rid of. So that's the first step that you do. It's still going. So some folks will say, well, what do you do about the green ones if there's a green one? I personally, like this one right here that's green, I just leave them. I leave them in there. You could discard them or kind of lay them to the side and see if they'll ripen if you want to, but I just throw them in with the rest.
Like that guy looks like, are we going to wash him though?
Yeah, we'll wash them.
Because he had spider webs on him. He looked okay minus the spider webs. Don't want no spider webs in your grape jelly. That would be unfortunate.
Yeah.
Don't want spider webs, period.
So a lot of people like jam. I'm just a jelly person, so I have made grape whole jelly before, but I just didn't care for it as much as I like jelly. So what I do is just get the juice from the grapes and make my jelly that way. But if you wanted to make jam or like grape whole jelly, I'm sure you could. There's also a grape whole pie that's really popular in Appalachia. But the one time I made it, I didn't care for it either. But a lot of people really love it, so that might be something you want to check into. So here's one that's just kind of bad. So when Corie and I went to get them, when Steve, or my sister-in-law, actually told me yesterday that I was welcome to get them if I wanted them, I asked Katie, because she's always down by the creek, I said, how do you think, what should I take to bring them home in? How many is there? And she's like, oh, one chicken bucket, we call them chicken buckets, what we kind of put scraps in to feed the chickens. She said, one bucket will do it. So I took 2 just in case. Well, it was all we could do to fill the 2 to actually carry them. They were so full, they were running over. They would have easily been 3 filled, wouldn't there, Corie?
Mm-hmm.
So we took 1 whole bucket to Granny and shared with her so that she could make grape jelly too. And she was so excited. She said, oh, you've just made my day. This is wonderful. You've made me so happy.
She was pretty tickled about it.
She loves to put up stuff just like I do. That's where I get it from.
There's me a big thing of them. And these just taste so different than the ones that you get at the store.
Different, yeah.
They taste a little more sour, but that's not it. It's that it tastes like it's fresh somehow. And to me, like the skin, let me find one. Like the skin on them, like will separate real easy. You know what I'm saying? And then look at that. It's like real gelatinous, and the like the juice out of it almost tastes thick and almost syrupy to me.
Yeah.
They don't taste. Sometimes you get grapes at the store and they just taste like nothing. They don't really have a taste.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, these are really pretty.
Oh yeah, they're beautiful.
I kind of felt like Granny when he told me I could have them. I was like, oh my gosh, is it Christmas?
Yeah, these are beautiful.
Excited to get them.
And he's had that grapevine for several years, but this, it takes a good while to get them established. But this one does pretty good.
Ours usually do pretty good. We have a few out there, but last year we moved our 2 established ones. We fooled around with them. We didn't move them. We didn't dig them up, but we cut them back. And when we tried to train them on, we just tried to train them on over the years on random, I don't know. We didn't really do a good job on putting something for them to grow on. So then last year we were going to do it right, and we put a cattle panel. And something about moving them, they didn't like. Kind of bending them, and I guess we cut some of them back. So, and then also this spring we had a really late frost, which of course Steve's house is just right below mine, so it didn't affect his any, obviously. But maybe by next year ours will be back to normal grape production. And we started 2 other grapes last year too, 2 other vines in a different area of the yard. Of course, they wouldn't have had grapes this year, but one of them got completely killed by that late frost. The other one's still growing, but...
Do you want those little baby green ones?
Well, when they're that little, they're kind of, these I've got on here, they've kind of, never did really progress past that, and they're hard, and they're, partially eaten by a bug. I would discard those.
Almost look like lime green little blueberries.
They do, yeah.
They have the look of a blueberry, but not the color. I dropped one out here somewhere. Gotta find it before I step on it. That's more of them than you think.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's filled that whole thing.
So some people will say, well, how many grapes does it take? I think if you're going to use Sure Gel, which is what I use, I'm going to use the low sugar Sure Gel. But I think it suggests 5 pounds of grapes. This is more than that. The way that I look at it usually, because it's just so hard to know, is that I process whatever fruit that I have, whether it's grapes or, here, Corie, grapes or apples or anything, whatever it is, blueberries, strawberries, whatever. And then I see what I've got, and then I decide, oh, well, I have enough to make 2 runs of jelly and almost a third. Well, that almost one, I just pop it in the freezer and save it till I get more. Or if I've got enough to make 2 runs of jelly and I really don't want to make but one, I make one one run of jelly, and then I freeze the rest. Or you can, if you had a lot of them, you could can the juice for future use. So I kind of don't look at it like that. But I think the recipe does say if you had 5 pounds. We have way more than 5 pounds, so we'll probably get several runs of jelly. So now we're going to wash them. while Steve doesn't use any kind of pesticides or anything like that, there are, of course, birds flying over them. There's all manner of bugs, Japanese beetles, and bees, and different things, and dogs running around. So that's why it's a good idea to wash them, so you can see
It's dirty.
what come off of them. Yeah. So then we'll give them another rinse. So you can see less dirty than before, but still some trash going around. So I'm going to do them one more time. But this time, as I wash them one more time and rinse them, I'm going to put them in the pot that I'm actually going to cook them in. So now that we've got the grapes cleaned and we're ready to cook them, we're going to fill the water up, not over them, but just till it begins to come up. You can kind of see it coming up in the cracks, is what I think of it as, around the grapes. So as the grapes begin to cook a little bit, you can take a spoon or a potato masher or something and begin to mash them down to let them release their juice. And once they start kind of simmering, I like to cook them for about 15 to 20 minutes to make sure that all that juice is released. So our grapes have been cooking for, I don't know, about 7 or 8 minutes. So they're about to get to where we're ready to strain them out, and then we'll be ready to make the jelly. It's funny when I make things like this, like a lot of the stuff, of course, would come out of my own garden. You know, if I'm making pickles or putting up, or canning green beans or putting up tomatoes or whatever. And I always think about how a little bit of that summer, a little bit of that freshness, a little bit of that, I guess, I don't know, whatever I'm feeling at that moment goes in the jars with it. So then when I open a jar of tomatoes on a cold winter day to make soup, it's almost like I can smell the sunshine on the tomatoes and feel the sun on my arms, you know. Sounds kind of silly, I know, but still. But when I do this like these, the grapes, do something like I'm doing today, putting up jelly, me and Corie, making grape jelly, and knowing they come from Steve, when we eat grape jelly this winter, I will think of it as Steve's grape jelly. Even though he didn't make it, he didn't help us, but he was kind enough to share his grapes with us. So when we get this jelly made, I'm going to be thinking of it as Steve's jelly. And if we share it with somebody, I'll be thinking, oh, I can give Papa Tony a jar of Steve's grape jelly for Christmas. I will just always think of it as Steve's jelly till it's gone. Okay, now we're ready to strain our grapes after they've been cooking. I love to use this ricer. Miss Cindy got me this years and years ago, so it's just what I prefer. A food meal, really just a strainer. Just about anything would work. This is just what I prefer to use. Wish y'all could smell this. It smells heavenly, doesn't it, Corie?
It smells really good.
So good, so good. Grapes are really easy to strain and to get that pulp out because their peelings are so thick they're not going to go through the holes, and then of course their seeds are larger, not like little blackberry seeds or raspberry or mulberries that can kind of slip through on you. So they make it pretty easy to strain. When the girls were little and took their lunch every day of the world to school, they would never eat in the lunchroom. They were too picky eaters to do that, weren't you, Corie?
Yeah, we were picky eaters too, today, really.
When they first started in kindergarten, the teachers, they had different teachers, but both teachers said to me, they're such good little girls, but what do they eat? They won't eat anything at school. I tried to get them to eat in the lunchroom that year, in the cafeteria. Anyway, but in those days of packing their lunch, I would make grape juice and then freeze it in little containers and then send that with them to drink. And they liked that. Fruit and cheese and yogurt, that's what they lived on, pretty much.
A huge staple of my diet today. I had fruit and cheese with some other things at lunch. You want me to get that one?
Yeah, I'll have to put a little bit more in something else. So we finished straining all the grapes, and we ended up with probably about 12 or 13 cups of juice. So plenty to make jelly with. That would make 2 runs of jelly, if not 3. Make 2. I think we need 5.5 cups of jelly. So for sure 2 with some left over, which, as I said, we can pop in the freezer. I probably got some in the freezer that I could actually add to it and make 3 runs if we want to. So now we're going to show you how to continue on. And I'm using, like I said, I use pectin. A lot of people don't like to use pectin. That's okay. You can use the old-timey method of just cooking your jelly and your juice, your sugar and your juice till it gets to the right consistency, the right temperature, to the right gel. But I use pectin. I like to use sometimes, and today's what I'm using, like a low sugar. So the one I'm using today uses less sugar than normal pectin. So we've got the juice in the pot measured out. We're actually going to make a double batch of jelly since we had enough juice from the ones we picked this morning. So I have it in there. It's so pretty and so loved, smells so great. Sure Gel has or whatever kind of gel, you need to follow the directions on it, but the one I'm using today has kind of changed. Used to, you just put the packet of Sure Gel, whether it was low sugar or the regular, in with the fruit and stir it up, and then bring the mixture to a boil, pour your sugar in, bring it to another boil a minute, and put it in the jars. Now it advises you to mix the Sure Gel packet with 1/4 cup sugar, so I have 2 packets and 2 1/4 cup sugar, and then to add that to the fruit, to add it that way. So I'm going to do that part, and then we're going to wait for the mixture to come up to a boil. Okay, our grape juice and our Sure Gel sugar mixtures come up to a boil, so we're going to add all of the rest of the sugar. And you just want to add it all at once. And I will put the amounts that I used for 1 run of jelly. Of course, I'm doubling it, but I'll put that down below in the description, so you won't have to hunt for that. A good tip too, if you've never used Sure Gel or any of the pectins before, inside them they have a little folded piece of like recipes for freezer jam, jellies, jams, all different kinds, and for all different kinds of fruits, and it shows, gives you detailed information. So if you ever needed to depend on that, you could do that as well. So now we're going to let this come back to a boil. And then we're going to boil 1 minute, and we'll be ready to put in the jars. You just want to stir it well at this point to make sure all the sugar's incorporated, and so that it can melt and do its thing evenly. So we're now back up to a full rolling boil. We're going to let it boil for 1 minute, and then we'll be ready to put it in the jars. You can see this foam on the top. If that bothers you, all you have to do, you can actually put in a little bit of butter to cut down on foam. Or you can take a spoon or something and kind of scoop it up, put it in just to discard and get rid of it. Truthfully, that foam doesn't bother me, so I just usually leave it. It doesn't taste bad or anything like that. It might make the top of your jelly look a little kind of foamy like that, but it doesn't hurt anything. But that's totally personal preference, whether you want to leave the foam, to try adding a little bit of butter to see if that cuts down on it, or skim it off. So now I'm ready to start ladling the hot jelly in the jars. I like to heat my jars in a pot of boiling or simmering water. Other people like to do it in the stove or the dishwasher, so that, again, that's personal preference too on how you like to do it. And then you just start putting your jelly in the jars. Such a pretty color. You can really use whatever preference size of jars. I use, since I keep my jars and I do a lot of canning and a lot of putting up, I just go downstairs and just grab a variety of jars. I like all different sizes. Predominantly though, or primarily, I use pints and half pints, or jelly jars as we call them. It's the kind that is what I prefer to use. Other people, I had a friend who made grape jelly every year, and she said, why fool with those little jars when you could just use a quart? So she made her jelly in quart jars. So that's just personal preference, is whether you want to make small jars of jelly or large jars. Really doesn't matter. And I've had a lot of people ask me why I turn the jars upside down. That's just because that's how I learned how to make jelly. The thought behind that is that it really ensures that the cap gets hot, and then when you turn them back right side up, which you do in about you let them sit upside down for about 5 minutes, then that really ensures that they seal well. That's the theory behind it. I know a lot of people who don't do that and their jelly does just fine. So that's just, I guess, personal preference too, but because that's how I learned how to make jelly, I just find myself, it's kind of like you're like, well, if it's not broke, you know, don't change anything. If it works for you, then just keep doing it the same way. Okay, we're on the last jar of jelly. We have just a small amount left in the pot, which is typical, seems like, when I make jelly. But I don't let that bother me a bit. I like to scrape it out into a bowl and we eat that. It's so good, fresh jelly. I have a little tiny jar that I could put it in, but I'm just going to put it in a bowl, and the next couple of days we'll eat it, whether it's on a sandwich or with biscuits. And we'll eat it while it's fresh and good. So Corie and I finished our jelly. Turned out really pretty. We have about 5 pints. Well, we have 5 pints and 3 half pints. Yeah, half pints. And then we have like a jar or a bowl full here that we're going to just put in the fridge and eat first. It's really pretty. Turned out a beautiful color.
It's like a perfect mix between red and pink. It ain't pink and it ain't red.
Yeah. My favorite thing to do when I make jelly is to get a piece of white bread. I know it's not all that great for you, but gosh.
It sure tastes good.
Sure tastes good, yeah. And make a little foldy sandwich. Usually I get a glass of milk too to go with it. You want to?
Thank you.
Half with me?
That was really good.
So good. I can make supper out of that.
No joke.
I used to take, sounds really weird, but a lot of times for dinner at work I would take a jelly and take my bread, make a jelly sandwich, and eat a cucumber with it in the summer. And that was my lunch.
I could eat that.
So Uncle Steve's grapes made grape jelly. Uncle Steve's jelly tastes really good. That's what I'll be calling it until it's all gone. When you think about Uncle Steve, Corie, what's the first thing you remember about him when you're from being a little kid?
His mustache. I mean, I feel silly saying that, but he always had, excuse me, a mustache. I mean, he still does sometimes, but I think of that. And then I think, too, like, he was always, I don't know if this is the right word, but it's the word in my head, cautionary. Like, if we were playing, you know, with April, one of his kids, he might say, now, y'all be careful playing outside now, or you be careful jumping in the leaves like that, or just whatever. So I kind of think of him like that.
He's always telling you to be careful.
Probably because we were reckless.
Yeah, he had a mustache as long as I can remember until, a couple of years ago, they went to the beach, family vacation, and he come back without a mustache.
And we were like, who are you?
Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, you look so different. And he surprised them too when he was at the beach. He didn't tell anybody. He just went to the bathroom and shaved it off. I don't know why. He just decided it was time or whatever. It's funny. Matt changes his, you've probably already noticed from our video, Kim and Steve, actually Steve, my brother Steve and his wife Kim, they tease and say Matt changes his facial hair so much he must be in the witness protection program. So he'll be no mustache, clean shaven, then he'll grow a mustache, then he'll be back clean shaven, then he'll grow a goatee, then he'll grow a beard, then he'll go back. It just depends on whatever hits him, I reckon. But when he was years ago when we were first married, and we had the girls really after we were married, but even when we were first married, he had a mustache all the time too. And the first time he shaved it, when the girls were really big enough to notice, to understand, they were just toddlers, you know, running around, he shaved it, and I don't even remember, he didn't think anything about it. Neither one of us did, because that was something he would do often. But he come and sat down in the living room, and when one of the girls noticed him and then the other one did, they started squalling. They just cried, and they run down the hallway, and they come back, and they wanted him to put it back, Daddy, put it back. Well, of course he couldn't. They were just so distraught over it. They did not like it when he shaved his mustache.
I remember that, because I was like, what?
Yeah. So we hope you've enjoyed watching us make Steve's grape jelly now that we've made it. And we hope that you'll leave us a comment and tell us, do you like grape jelly? Is that one of your favorites? I like blackberry the best, but I also like grape and peach, I guess, is the ones I like the best. But tell us what your favorite jelly is. And as always,
we hope you'll drop back by often to help us celebrate Appalachia.